In this video, we're going to look at national insurance tax calculations for National 5 applications. On the screen at the moment, we've got an example of national insurance rates that might get given in an exam question or textbook exercise. Now, these national insurance rates will vary maybe year to year depending on the actual insurance rates at the time. So the ones that are on the screen are from the 2019 exam paper. So national insurance rates, just like tax as well, there are different rates that apply depending on how much money a certain individual earns, and earnings fall into different bands, we call them, and those are more complicated for income tax as opposed to national insurance, because for national insurance there are only 3 bands that you really need to be interested in. So we've got a band where we pay 0%, and that in this particular case is up to £8,424. That's usually kind of known as a personal allowance, an amount that you're allowed to earn up to before you start paying anything. Then we've got this middle band, and for that you pay 12% on anything that's earned in between those two. And then we've got a band at 2% for higher earners, okay, above that upper amount. For national insurance questions, you're usually going to get asked 2 things, okay? You're usually going to get asked in maybe a part A or a first one. You're just going to work out the total national insurance payments that someone is going to have to pay. And then often in part B, you're asked to work out a person's net pay after that. So you've got to take into account what they earn and subtract from that things like the national insurance that you've just worked out, pension, and usually income tax as well. So those are some things that you have to consider as well in part B. So you've got to have an understanding of all those things to answer these questions successfully. Now, in order to work out how much national insurance a person pays, you've got to consider the 3 bands and where the money that they have lies. And a good way to actually kind of consider the 3 bands, or to visualise them, is buckets, essentially, considering how much money is in each bucket. Okay, so we've got 3 buckets. And in the first bucket, you pay 0%. In the second bucket, you pay 12%. And in this final bucket, you pay 2%. Okay, so then you then consider the amounts that you've got. So if a person was to earn a salary of £30,000, £30,000 is in this range here. So that would mean that some of the money is going to be in the 12% bucket, and then some of the money is going to be in the 0% bucket. And essentially what you've got to do is you've got to distribute that money into each band and then calculate the percentage on each of those. Okay, so a good way to kind of consider it is thinking about buckets, thinking about how much money is going to be in each bucket using the bands up there on the screen. Okay, so just considering some buckets. So if we took a wee example and we did use £30,000 for example, and the information that's up above on the screen. So for £30,000, anything from £8,424 to £46,384 is taxed at 12%. So that would be falling into this bucket. So to work out how much money is in that bucket, the lower limit is £8,424 and they earn £30,000. So to work out how much we've got in this bucket, it would be £30,000 minus £8,424. And that tells us how much is in that bucket. So in that bucket, we've got 30,000 and we're subtracting off 8,424, and that tells us in that bucket we've got £21,576 in that bucket, and that's getting taxed at 12%. And then the rest of the money, okay, so in this case it would be £8,424 that's getting taxed at 0%. And that's how their money is essentially getting distributed. So £21,576 is getting taxed at 12%, £8,424, nothing is getting taxed on that. And then all you need to do is work out what 12% of that amount is. So it'd be 12% of £21,576. To do that, we turn that into a decimal by dividing by 100 and then simply multiply. And getting our answer, so times 0.12, that person pays £2,589, 12 pence in national insurance, because they pay no national insurance on the £8,424. That's one example. However, in some cases, you might then get an amount that stretches beyond the upper limit, so beyond the amount shown here. If that is the case, some money will be in the upper band, so that kind of upper bucket. Some money will be in the middle bucket for 12%, and then some will be in the 0%, and you've got to work out how much is in each. So that's just a good visualisation, I suppose, of the bands, considering that each goes into a bucket essentially, and you've then got to work out a percentage of the amount that lies in each bucket. Let's take a look at some past paper questions now. So we've got John works for a resurfacing company. His annual salary is £17,108. National insurance is calculated on a person's salary before deductions such as pension contributions are taken off. So those are the rates there, those are the rates that I used in the other document. We've got to calculate John's annual national insurance payment, that's the first part. And then the second part is to work out his annual net pay. These are all calculator questions. So it says that his annual salary is, is £17,108. So he clearly belongs in this band here. So he earns £17,108. So how much money is there going to be in that band at 12%? So we're looking at how much national insurance is going to be paid at 12%. The first thing we need to actually consider then is how much money is being taxed at 12%. So if he earns £17,108, he belongs in the middle band, and anything above £8,424 is taxed at 12%. So we need to work out how much that is just by finding out the difference through subtraction. So we're subtracting the lower limit, and that will then tell us how much money is being taxed at 12%. So that's essentially the middle bucket, and in that middle bucket there's £8,864. And now we just need to work out what 12% of that amount is, and we do that simply by converting 12% into a decimal and multiplying. And that is 1063.68. So that's how much national insurance that this person pays. He pays no more national insurance than that, because anything below £8,424 you pay 0% on. So in the middle bucket he's paying 12%, in the lower bucket you pay 0%. So this is all that he's paying for national insurance. So that there is an example of one that only really has one step. But at the end of the video we'll take a look at an example which has 2 steps because of the amount that the person earns. So that's usually how part A goes, or part 1 in this case. Part 2 is working out the person's net pay. Now we need to remember that net pay, so we've got 2 words, gross and net. A person's gross pay is how much they get before any deductions. So that is this amount up here, his annual salary. And then net pay is minus any deductions. So it says that he pays 7% of his annual salary into his pension, and he pays income tax. So we need to subtract off income tax, pension, and the national insurance from the question before. Now that's important. Please make sure that you don't forget to subtract off the national insurance that you've calculated previously. But we need to actually work out what his pension is. And that is a common question when we have to actually calculate the pension. It simply says that his pension is 7% of his annual salary. So just be careful, it's 7% of the amount that we started with up the top. To work out 7%, convert it to a decimal, and then multiply. So 0.07 times 17,108, and that tells us the pension that he is having to pay yearly, and that is £1,197.56. This and the national insurance and the income tax all has to be subtracted in order to find his annual net pay. And the annual net pay is what we start with minus all of the yearly deductions. So we've got our income tax, our national insurance, that was calculated from above. As I say, make sure we include that. We've got the pension, and we've got the income tax of 1,051.60. Okay, and then we get our answer to that, and that's his net pay. So we're just going to subtract all of those off. And the answer that he's left with is £13,795.16. So those are the two steps for national insurance calculations, really. First one is to work out the national insurance paid, and then often in the second part you're asked to work out a person's net pay by subtracting the deductions. Let's take a look at another example, and then we'll go on to a final example which has the extra step needed. So we've got Fiona that's a vet, she started a new job, annual salary of £42,000. That's the national insurance rates. This time notice they're different, they just change depending on kind of the year. It says, part 1, calculate her annual national insurance payment. So I think we can probably fit that in the space in here. So if this person earns £42,000, they belong in the middle band here. So no money is getting taxed at 2%, it's all going to be at 12%. We essentially just need to work out how much is going to be in that bucket, in that band. So if they earn £42,000, and anything above £8,164 is taxed at 12%, we just need to find out how much we've got above that amount by subtracting that off. So type that into the calculator, and it's £33,836. Then 12% of that is being taxed, or you're paying national insurance on 12% of that. So 0.12 times that amount, and that tells us the national insurance payment that this person is making. And it's £4,060.32. Okay, so that's what part A looks like. Then part B, or the second part, says that this person pays income tax of £5,427.96. She also pays money into her pension. She's paid in 12 equal monthly instalments. Calculate her monthly net pay. So this time it's slightly different. It's not annual net pay, it's monthly. So we're told how much she gets paid annually. We're told how much comes off annually. And then all we need to do is work out the net pay by subtracting off and then dividing by 12, because she gets paid in 12 payments. So you calculate the net pay, and technically this would be the annual net pay. We take the amount she started with, £42,000, and we subtract off the national insurance that we've calculated from the question above, the income tax, and the pension. And then we get our net pay. Now that's annually, so we need to subtract all that off, and that'll give us the annual amount. And if she's paid in 12 payments throughout the year, we're just going to divide by 12 to get the monthly net pay. So it's 29, this is annually. And then monthly, we just divide that by 12. So we're getting a different flavour of different types of questions that can maybe get asked. But most of them tend to follow an A and a B part structure. A, work out the national insurance, and then B, work out the net pay of some sort. So dividing that by 12, this person gets £2,429.31 per month. Okay, let's look at the final question. So this final question is slightly different because we notice that this person, Graham, earns £49,920. So he actually earns money above the maximum threshold up here. So we are going to have to work out how much he pays at 2%, then how much he pays at 12%, and then add those together. So that's what part A is asking us to do. So he's paying national insurance at 2% for some of his money. We need to work out how much. So if he pays national insurance at 2% on anything over £42,308, we're just going to subtract his amount from that. So 49,920 minus 42,380. So if we can kind of consider the buckets, that's in the last bucket for 2%. So that's in that final bucket. Some of his money's going in there and paying national insurance at 2%. So that is £7,540. He pays that at 2%, so 2% of that is 0.02 times 7,540, which equals just £150.80. You obviously don't pay that much because it's only 2%, but now we need to work out how much they pay at 12%. Now if you kind of consider the bucket for the 12%, the bucket goes from £8,060 to £42,380. If this person earns £49,920, that bucket is obviously going to be full, that band is going to be full. So to work out the amount they're paying at 12%, it's just 42,380 minus £8,060. So it's 42,380 minus £8,060. And then on any money that's left, he pays nothing on that £8,060, he pays 0%. And the answer for that one is £34,320. So on that amount above is the tax, is the national insurance of 2%. On that amount there, he pays 12%. So we work out 12% by times and by 0.12. Which is £4,118.40. And then we need to add these two answers together to work out the total. I'm just going to change colour, just so we've got something different. So the total is this number and this number added together. So I'm adding on £150, 80p. So in total, he pays £4,269.20 in national insurance. So we notice that that's slightly longer. You would probably get an extra mark for that because it involves an extra step. But then after that, we've got part B, which looks quite similar. It says he pays 9% of his annual salary into his pension. He's got an income tax of that amount there, and he's paid in 12 monthly instalments. What is his monthly net pay? So we need to work out his annual net pay and then divide that by 12. But what we're going to need to do is actually work out his pension first. So this is part B. And we need to work out what his pension is. I'll do that on the left. And then we need to work out what his net pay is and divide it by 12. So he pays 9% of his annual salary, so it was 0.09 times the total amount that he earns, which was £49,920. So 0.09 times 49,920. So his pension is £4,492.80. And then we need to work out his monthly net pay. So we're going to take the amount that he started with, so that £49,920. We're going to subtract off all of the deductions, and then we're going to divide that answer by 12 and then get our final answer. Okay, just because I'm running out of space down the bottom of the page. So we've got £49,920, subtract off the person's pension, so £4,492.80, subtract off the total national insurance that we calculated, that's the answer there in green, and subtract off the income tax that they pay, which is £6,870.04. That gives me £34,287.96. Divide that by 12, so this person gets £2,857.33 each month. So for national insurance questions, there's quite a lot of working in some cases. There's a lot of numbers. Just make sure that you're being clear with your working, underlining things, making sure that you don't miss anything out when you're calculating net pay. But by practicing these types of questions, they will hopefully repeat themselves, and the process is quite repetitive, so you'll get to understand the calculations that you're doing, and that they follow a part A and a part B structure. In part A, you calculate the national insurance that they pay. Sometimes that'll just be a one-step one at 12%, but as we've seen in this example, they may also pay some of their national insurance at 2%, and then you need to add the two answers together. And then in part B, you often need to find the net pay by subtracting any deductions such as pension, income tax, and national insurance, and then you might have to divide that by 12 to find out how much they would earn per month.